Hello, everyone, and welcome. We'll pause just a moment as people join the webinar. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to everyone just joining. We're going to give it just one more moment as people join. Hello, all. Thank you so much for joining the Initiative for Responsible Mining Assurance, or IRMA, webinar today to share with the world the release of the audit reports from the Barro Alto and Minas-Rio mining operations in Brazil, owned by Anglo American Mining. My name is Amy Boulanger, and I welcome you to the webinar today. Important logistics to start. Please look to the bottom of your screen and you will see opportunity to choose interpretation. There is a round circle there. It looks like a globe, and you may choose English or Portuguese. So while you can hear me speaking in English right now, it's important you choose the English channel, or if you speak English, or you will not hear the English channel when we switch over to our Portuguese speakers. So choose your language choice there. If you have challenges, you may add them into the Q&A. And speaking of the Q&A at the bottom as well, we welcome your questions throughout the presentation today. And we will be leaving plenty of time at the end of this presentation for questions and answers. So please let us know if you have any technical difficulties, but again, there is an interpretation choice for English or Portuguese at the bottom of your screen, and you may choose there. Because we are simultaneously translating today between English and Portuguese, you will hear us speak slowly and also take pauses between speakers so that we provide time for our hardworking interpreters to catch up with us. So just letting you know that you will hear people slow down a little bit, and there's not a technical problem. We're just allowing time for the interpreters. All right, and with that, we can go ahead and move the slides forward, Alan. So thanks so much again to all of you for coming today. We will have a range of speakers. I'm Amy Boulanger. I serve as Executive Director for IRMA. We will also have IRMA's America's lead, Adan Oliveros Castro, with us. Michelle Smith, our Assurance Director, is here to assist with questions. And we're honored to have Ivan Simoes from Anglo American's operations in Brazil joining us, who will be speaking in Portuguese. We're going to start with a bit of background on what is IRMA and its role in the world and how the IRMA process works, just to set context for the meaning of these reports and the results of the reports. But then we will shift over to what we know you're most interested in, which is what is happening with the Barro Alto and Minas-Rio audit reports in IRMA, and then how can stakeholders and indigenous rights holders use these audits and perspectives from the company, Anglo American. Why did they do this process, and their feelings on their results as well. And we welcome your questions and answers as we go. We will leave time to take up those questions and answers, but you may begin adding them into the Q&A function using the icons at the bottom of your screen as we go. And we can move this next slide forward, Alan. And again, so why do we need a system like IRMA? We have a moment right now in the world where there is both opportunity for more responsible sourcing and opportunity for the benefits that can come from the materials that many of us use every day in industrialized society, and we also have conflict, and we have a legacy over centuries of harm associated with mineral extraction. We know that we have the irony right now that as we are shifting energy sources away from oil and gas and thermal coal to address the climate crisis, we have increasing demand for other materials which also involve extraction that come from places just as oil, gas, and thermal coal did. We have increasing demand for lithium, nickel, cobalt, copper, iron ore, and others. We have indigenous communities and other communities who live near where this extraction happens, increasingly under stress. And it's not just the stress of extraction. Even as we work to address the climate crisis, we live in a world that already lives with the impacts of a climate crisis, with increasing droughts, increasing floods, risks to drinking water and human rights, and the conflict between people that come when communities are under stress. And we have a sense that the claims of environmental and social responsibility may not be legitimate, and that there's greenwashing out in the world. In this context, we have end brands who sell the cars and phones and jewelry to people asked to do more responsible sourcing and do their due diligence to understand their supply chains. And increasingly, that's not just a voluntary or ethical request, but it's increasingly a legal expectation around the world. Next slide, Alan. So how is IRMA responding to that? What's the purpose of the work we do? IRMA is currently the world's most rigorous and detailed standard for mining. It is stronger than any country's laws, but it's not pass-fail. We'll come back to that. It sets a value for continuing improvement, and mines at any level may engage. It applies across the world at, again, mines which are mechanized. So we collaborate with others working on artisanal scale mining, but the IRMA system is focused on driving improvements in large scale mining. And assessment is at the mine site level. So you won't have a company saying we are an IRMA certified company. We are verified responsible as a full company. They need to bring each of their operations under review. And the assessment is for each operation. And IRMA is unique in that it is an equally governed system. So for a mining company to step into this space, they know that the mining industry has a direct voice in how IRMA is governed, but its voice is equal in power and influence on the process alongside its customers, its investors, the communities most affected, NGO allies and advocates for communities and for the environment, and as well as the labor sector, organized labor. This is a picture of the IRMA standard. And so you can see it is more than 20 chapters long. It is seeking to hold that even as we are proud to protect worker health and safety, for example, or to protect human rights, we also want to understand at a mine site what's happening with the protection of water resources, what's happening with air quality or issues like blowing dust or noise. Are there emergency preparation and responsiveness in place, mine waste? So it's seeking to hold the range of issues and impacts that can happen in industrial scale mines and hold them in detail. And what we hear from mining companies repeatedly is that they do not find the detail too prescriptive. They find it helpful in understanding what are the expectations for those who are judging performance and asking for improvements in practice. It's a support to mine managers on the ground as well as the communities most affected to understand what is the global definition of best practice. The IRMA system is governed, as I mentioned, equally by 6 houses. The names you see here are the people who have volunteered to serve on IRMA's governing board. They have an agreement that they all serve equally, mining, their customers who make cars or electronics or jewelry, the investor sector who fund this work and can influence positive change as well, then NGOs, organized labor, and affected communities. They each have 2 seats, and they also govern equally in that if there are 2 no votes from one house, that is a block on a decision. So 10 out of 12 votes does not carry something in IRMA if the 2 no votes were to come from one house. So they have made a commitment that they don't leave a house behind. It's to create value and accountability to all who are there. That has at times made IRMA's work slow in its early years building, but it's also the strength of the accountability of the system to create value for all. This is a reflection here of companies who are the purchasers of mined materials, who are members in IRMA. So it's not just the board of directors who serves to set the IRMA standard and the rules of how it's measured and audited, but there are a set of companies behind them, beyond those board members, who are there seeking to drive value for greater environmental and social performance, including 7 car makers, the jewelry sector, the tech sector, and others making household products that we use each day. And as we shift to the next slide and look in particular to civil society, I'm going to turn to my colleague Adan Olivares Castro, who's our Americas lead, who can speak directly to this, um, these sectors, and then also to the other ways that IRMA.
Thank you, Amy. We actively engage with NGOs and civil society groups beyond the ones that are IRMA members, which are listed on this slide. IRMA offers the platform for diverse stakeholders to engage with one another, to listen and learn from various perspectives, and encourage collaboration to continuously improve mining practices. Next slide, please. These are just a few examples of NGOs referencing IRMA as a tool to raise the bar even higher when it comes to improving best mining practices. NGOs have expressed to IRMA the need to have access to credible information that is independently verified and where anyone is welcomed to participate, where the voice of an impacted stakeholder as well is heard and given equal value against evidence submitted by a mining operation to comply with the requirement of the IRMA standard. Next slide, please. There is the concern that responsible mining or green mining may in some way be a myth. Historically, there has been distrust among stakeholders, and IRMA operates in this world of trying to be a value to all and to be a reference point for all for greater trusted information around the performance of a mine site, and also creating value for companies to improve social and environmental responsibility. Next slide, please. We recognize that no voluntary initiative can ever replace the need and higher value of the laws and regulations that apply to all operators. IRMA's objective is to be a tool that supports a government's mission to set laws that all operators should follow. We appreciate that last year, the Chilean government referenced IRMA in Chile's national lithium strategy as a frame of reference for the government to design and apply a process of stakeholder dialogue and participation. The European Parliament has also referenced IRMA as a tool to guide critical raw material legislation, and IRMA has also been mentioned in the last few years at the UN Climate Change Conference, again as a tool to address harm at the top of the supply chain for energy transition. Next slide, please. As evidenced in the province of British Columbia in Canada, First Nations can also use IRMA to make clear their rights to free, prior, and informed consent, and asserting their rights through the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, as referenced in the IRMA standard. And now I will pass it back to Amy.
Thanks so much, Alan. Okay, next slide, Alan. So how does an IRMA audit work, and how do you hold the audit results accountable and useful? So a mining company, when they approach IRMA, may start with a self-assessment. We ask all companies to begin with this, and through support from the purchasing sector, that tool is free to mining companies as they approach IRMA. The self-assessment tool is exactly the same tool and process that the auditors themselves use. So a mining company can begin by serving as their own auditors, walking them through the IRMA process, understanding the expectations, uploading their evidence into it so that they're using that time not only to learn, but actually prepare for independent review. And they may use it publicly and share that they're working on this, or they may use it confidentially at this point. During the time of a self-assessment, however, mining companies can't make any claims of achievement against the IRMA standard, that it's independently verified, or what their score would be. They must move to the second phase for that, which is to have the independent third-party review against the IRMA system. This is where claims can be made of achievement, as Anglo American will be able to do so now with these two operations. And they shared those results publicly. This is a required piece of the independent audit review process. Next slide, Alan. The IRMA audits are transparent and inclusive. The audits are publicly noticed when they begin so that anyone may participate. Anyone has direct line to the auditors who are there. Companies agree that there are no reprisals for community workers and others to participate in these audits. The auditors are interviewing beyond the mine site. They're with civil society workers and others, and IRMA as a system encourages the engagement of others and is actively reaching out to civil society and others to participate. And then companies are required to freely make available their reports and allow the posting of those detailed reports on IRMA's website for anyone to review and engage. The end result is not viewed as the audit report itself. It's the beginning of a conversation between the mining company and its stakeholders in greater depth for years to come, where it's a document from which commitments to improve can be made. The current engagement in the mining sector is global around the world. There are now 82 mining companies participating with more than 103 mine sites between them, formally engaged in the IRMA system. 60 of those sites are still self-assessing. 24 are piloting new draft standards, including the new draft standard for exploration and development, and 19 independent assessments underway. So you may have heard of the ones in Zimbabwe and Chile and Mexico that are already out, but there are a number of new audits coming across 30 countries and more than 50 different mined materials represented between those sites. So to give you a sense of what's coming ahead, you've got these two sites in Brazil, but you will have in the coming weeks also sites in South Africa and Argentina releasing our first surveillance audit, which is the check-in in between full reviews at the Anglo American site in Zimbabwe, but then also sites in Senegal, Mozambique, the United States, and additional sites in Brazil and South Africa as well. And we welcome all of these companies who are doing this work around the world to increase the transparency and their efforts to improve social and environmental responsibility. And we encourage value across the supply chain for that effort. So now what you're really here for, we know, to speak more about the Barro Alto and Minas-Rio audit reports. I want to say something first about what's especially notable in these sites, in that these are firsts. These are the first two audit reports for mining operations in Brazil. This is the first nickel mine audit report and also the first audit report in IRMA against an iron ore operation. What's particularly notable about those two firsts by material is that we are connecting the raw material extraction with both the electric vehicle supply chain and the steel supply chain, going into building materials as well as electric vehicles and everyday household products. And so this opportunity to connect value for reducing harm and improving social and environmental responsibility from the mine level to the end products that industrialized society is using each day is increased in the IRMA system with the release of these two reports. What's important to note in this is that these audit reports are based on audits which began years ago. This is because these reports, the process began during COVID, which slowed down on-site visits twice. It was a learning phase for everyone involved. These are the first 20 audits happening in the IRMA system. So we have mining companies learning the process. We have the audit firms themselves learning how do they audit the system, and IRMA also learning and adjusting and adding guidance to our standard and making adaptations in real time to be responsive to what we learn during these first audits. In addition to those things which take time, the company took optional corrective action period, which is allowed in IRMA, which is after the first report is produced. The company may take up to 1 year to make improvements in real time, because our leading purpose in IRMA is not simply to score performance, but is to drive value for those sites to improve in reducing environmental and social impacts. So Anglo American can speak more to the time that they took there as well to make improvements in real time. And while there's more to say, and we ask each of you to read these reports in depth, and please tell us if you don't see the full story as you understand at these sites in Brazil. What you have here now is an unprecedented more than 170 pages of details on Anglo American's performance at both the Minas-Rio and the Barro Alto sites. So please review, and we would like your feedback. As Adan said earlier, if you feel that the information here is not correct, we absolutely want to hear back from you, and Anglo American welcomes your questions in response to what you read in these reports. Again, this gives you a sense of the audits at both of these sites, where they began with self-assessment, the audit firms then doing a desk review of all the uploaded evidence that came in, then on-site audits, then time taken for the company to make improvements, and then auditors need to go back and verify that those improvements have been made to this release point now. Mines in the future will not have as long a process as this. We won't have COVID there, and we've also tightened the timelines, but just to give you a sense of the years involved in this process. When you open both of the reports for Barro Alto and for Minas-Rio, you will see in both of them that the results are detailed. So it's not simply an overall score, but you will see a score for each chapter in the more than 20 chapters. And then when you open the chapter, you will see how they performed by individual requirements. So if a chapter is, for example, 77%, you can see which requirements they achieved to get to that 77%. And then you can also see which things that they could still do to get to that next 23% as they go. So as an in-depth opportunity for companies, for their customers, and for civil society to understand the performance and what did auditors see and verify when they were on the site. Go ahead, Alan. This is also the one for Minas-Rio. So same for both of these two operations. You'll be able to read in depth. In this next slide, what I want to say that's important is what do those findings mean by score? So again, IRMA is not pass-fail. IRMA uses a scoring tool. I heard in Cape Town this week, someone refer to IRMA as exclusive. IRMA is not exclusive. It is a system where you do not need to be a member to join. Any mining company is welcome to join and do an independent audit. And it is not pass-fail. So a company can come in at any point in its journey and begin and benchmark where its performance is now and show improvement over time. We provide, in addition to the scores for each requirement and each chapter, an overall achievement score, because we're aware that some in the world are not going to read 170 pages in depth, and they may want a quick sketch of what's there. So these are the IRMA achievement levels, and to help you understand what they mean, there's IRMA transparency, which is simply a mine being audited against the IRMA system and sharing its score. However, we provide added recognition when a site reaches at least 50% in all 4 of the main principal areas of IRMA's standard. So you couldn't have 100% in environment chapters, for example, and 0 in social and be IRMA 50. You need to reach 50% in all 4 of the main principal areas of the IRMA standard to reach IRMA 50. And in addition to that, you must at least substantially meet all 40 of the individual requirements in the IRMA standard that are deemed critical. So IRMA 50 would mean you have met at least 50% of all 4 of those main principles and all 40 of the critical requirements, at least substantially, with a commitment to have made them fully met by the surveillance audit check-in. In this case, both the Minas-Rio and Barro Alto operations in Brazil have met the IRMA 75 level, which means they have met at least 75% in all 4 of those principal areas, in addition to at least substantially meeting all 40 critical requirements. So I'm going to shift to Adan, who can share just a bit on how diverse readers might use these 2 reports. And then we're going to open in just a moment to turn to Anglo American to also share, and also welcoming your questions. So please go ahead and add questions to the Q&A as well. Adan, over to you.
Thank you, Amy. I wonder if we go up the next slide, please. So how can the stakeholders we serve use this report? Community members, mine workers, and NGOs can use it to better understand areas of strength, what areas of an operation can improve, also ask for more information, and advocate for changes that are important to you, our listeners representing these stakeholder groups. Customers to the company and investors now have access to a comprehensive report, as Amy mentioned, to help understand the Barro Alto and Minas-Rio's operations and better understand affected communities and worker perspectives, and use their leverage as a purchaser to seek improvements. Other mining companies in Brazil can learn from the experience of Anglo American and other mining companies around the world that have been audited against the IRMA standard. Measuring against the IRMA standard should not be looked at by the mining company as daunting, but rather as a unique opportunity, as Amy emphasized. Finally, government can, from all levels, not national, subnational, state governments within Brazil, can also get a better sense of the performance of both operations and community input, and also feel empowered to use the IRMA standard as a way to strengthen laws and regulations for other mine operators in the region. Next slide, please. So all forms of feedback are encouraged and welcomed by IRMA. Next slide. I would like to remind everyone, as Amy briefly mentioned, that both audit reports can be found on IRMA's website using the 2 links that you see on the slide. As operators of both mines, Anglo American is a resource as well to answer questions about their own performance, and we encourage listeners to reach out to Anglo American directly at the email address listed here, or also participate in the questions and answer period in this webinar. If you have questions about how the audit was done, you can direct these to the audit firm IRMA CVS for the Barro Alto audit, and SCS Global Services for Minas-Rio. Emails are also provided on the slide, as you can see. If you disagree with the IRMA audit system or standard requirements, you can file a complaint or provide feedback to IRMA directly in Portuguese, English, or any other language via the email listed here on the slide or also through WhatsApp. If you have any other feedback, perhaps a way to improve the layout of the report or a specific requirement or piece of information you appreciated in the report, please feel free to get in touch with the IRMA team and let us know. Next slide, please. And now I will pass it on to Ivan Derujo Simao, who's the Director of Corporate Affairs and Sustainability with Anglo American.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. And it is a pleasure to be participating on this webinar to share the results of our IRMA standards auditing. I would like to bring some context to share who we are. We, Anglo American, we are a company that is over 100 years old, precisely 107 this year. This map shows our operations worldwide, 56 operational sites and over 100,000 employees globally. Our headquarters are in London in the UK. Specifically, here in Brazil, we have two different operations. One in the state of Goiás of nickel, and we have there two plants. One called Barro Alto that has been audited, and the other one that will soon be audited. We also have operations in the state of Minas Gerais, in Conceição do Mato Dentro, the town. There we work with iron ore, and we also have this pipeline that sends the ore to the port in the city of Rio, where it is shipped to our clients. Last year, we celebrated 50 years of operations here in Brazil. We are very proud of our contribution to the development of the country and also for all the jobs we generate here. Iron ore in Brazil is our largest operation. This is the 10th year here in Brazil. The mine is in Alvorada de Minas and Conceição do Mato Dentro. Those are the names of the two towns in the center of the state, Minas Gerais state. From there, there's this line that is over 500 kilometers in length so that it gets to the port. We have almost 10,000 employees, including those that are contractors, and our production capacity is of over 26 million tons yearly. We produce very high content iron ore, over 67.5%, which is highly valuable to our clients who produce green steel. In 23, we produced 24 million tons, the best results we've had in Brazil this far. As for our nickel operations, we have two plants, one in Barro Alto, and the other one in Nicoland, Nicolândia in Portuguese, both in the state of Pará. Specifically, in this case, Barro Alto was the one that underwent the audit, and we will soon be undergoing the process with Nicolândia as well. There, we hire almost 5,000 people, including those that are directly employed and those that are contracted. We there have this estimate of 40,000 tons, and nickel is something that is used for the production of stainless steel. The purpose of our company and one of the principles of our company is something that I highly value, which is to reimagine, reconceive mining so as to improve people's lives. We work with innovation. This is something very important to us. And improving people's lives and their quality of life while producing ore is something very important to us. Safety is one of our guiding principles, but care, respect, integrity, and responsibility, as well as collaboration and innovation, are our guiding principles, our values that guide all our work. And it is a great honor to be pioneering the adoption of IRMA standards here in Brazil. The first unit of iron ore and the first nickel unit to undergo IRMA standards audit. The fact that it's us, we are very proud. And those standards, this audit, they include several things that we already do, because in 2012, that's when we first released our plan of sustainable mining, always considering corporate governance and the environment as guiding principles. We always want to be a trusted partner in our business, in our operations, and we also want to have ethical value chains. This fits well what IRMA has as the base for its standards also. We always consider the interest of the communities around us, because we understand that good business has to be good for everyone involved. IRMA brings standards that were established or introduced not only by this industry, but also several other stakeholders that include the mining companies, but also NGOs, the workers, the communities, the investors, everyone who has an interest in this business, which must be good for all of them. So this audit, we expected our strengths to be highlighted, but also where we still have some work to do so that we can excel. And we are open to suggestions in terms of improvement. We work on continuous improvement so that we can always meet the expectations of all the stakeholders. We are very happy to have met all the critical indicators of this audit, and also this guide for improvement so that we can be increasingly and more responsible in what we do and always meeting the expectations of civil society. So that was my introduction, and I am here at your service to answer any questions.
So that so much fun. Have you for sharing your answers. If you have
I
questions,
apologize. Your
I
sound
will
was chopped.
Oh, yes, the sound was bad. I can hear that too. Okay, is our sound okay now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Samois, for sharing that with us. And we will use this time now for questions and answers. So I'll ask Adan, Oliveros Castro, and Michelle Smith to please come on camera with Yvonne and I. And we welcome your questions. So Yvonne, we have one question here already to you, which was if there were particular areas that were most challenging for Anglo American as you were doing this work. Are there particular aspects of the IRMA standard or the process or requirements that you were being asked to fulfill that were particularly challenging?
Okay. There are several challenges that are inherent to the mining activity, but also to where we have our operations. So we have a season of very heavy rains and then maybe 6 months of drought. So in drought, we have challenges such as the air quality that affects the communities, and so we introduced um, a process that is by our permanent interactions with the communities, we decide when we might interrupt our activities because the air quality is especially challenging. And this is how we meet the community's needs when the air quality becomes a true challenge. This is just an example because it's over 400 items that were assessed, and so I'm just bringing one example.
As others continue to put questions in the chat, I'm going to take one which asked, how do IRMA and Responsible Steel work together? And for those of you who aren't aware of the Responsible Steel system, it is another standard in this space of the mining and mineral supply chain. The Responsible Steel system has its own set of requirements to protect environmental and social values where steel processing happens. And they intentionally did not build a mining standard because they recognized there were a set of mining standards already out in the world that could provide for the responsible sourcing piece of the steel supply chain. So Responsible Steel speaks to what are the requirements for environmental and social responsibility at the steel processing level. But part of that is to ask the steel processor to do its due diligence in sourcing responsibly mined materials. What's good to know out of that is they recognize responsible sourcing through a short list of other standards. They look to the Better Coal system around coal extraction, to the Canadian Mining Association's Towards Sustainable Mining program, and to the IRMA system for responsible mining. What's particularly notable for the Barro Alto in Minas-Rio operations is that the highest level of recognition you can get for responsible sourcing in a responsible steel system is IRMA 50, and then next higher, IRMA 75. So by Anglo American making this effort to have their mines audited, they also become now mine site with the highest recognition for responsible sourcing into the responsible steel supply chain as well. And so we're excited about that opportunity and really looking forward to how do we work cooperatively with responsible steel to set up a whole supply chain of linkages and the efficiency that can go from driving value for greater environmental and social responsibility at the mine level through the purchase and trading, through mineral processing, and into the creation of end products, cars, building materials, and other uses. I can see, let's see, Adan, if you don't mind, I'm going to put you on the spot with a question that's come in. That's how does IRMA communicate these results for communities affected around these two mines? What is the IRMA role? And perhaps you can also speak to the role of other sectors and Anglo American as well on that.
Thank you, Amy. Great question. One of the steps that we take in order to increase our reach, considering that we don't have an in-person presence inside of the country, is not only through webinars such as this one, which is recorded, and we try to disseminate the webinar to different community groups that we're able to find through various searches, whether it's online or through other organizations that we collaborate with. But of course, there's always the opportunity to improve that outreach, especially in country. And this is something that as we continue to grow within IRMA, we hope to have that capacity in the future to have that in-person presence in order to reach communities. I've also had the opportunity last year to visit the Belo Horizonte area, talk to impacted community members around the region, as well as academic circles, to first raise awareness about what IRMA is, and also work to prepare people for the release of audit reports in the region. I'll pass it on to Ivan if he would like to add anything on Anglo American's strategy for communicating the results to communities and other stakeholder groups.
Regarding our communication channels with the community, we have a permanent, ongoing engagement with communities. We have people working in the field, and we mean each individual in those communities. We know every family, we know every individual, and we have a permanently open communication with all of them, regardless of IRMA results to be communicated. This is something that we do regularly with every stakeholder. We always bring these topics, we always share the results of audits, regardless of this moment now of IRMA results.
Yvonne, you have another question that's come in, which is asking, when you did the self-assessment first, how much Anglo American needed to change and how much you needed to invest to move from where you initially found yourselves to get to IRMA 75?
we carried out our self-assessment in 2020 in Barro Alto, and then in 2021, Minas-Rio, and that together with other audits that were performed in 2021. What did this audit bring to us? It was a snapshot of that moment to show us where we were. And that moment means that we were not working to adapt, to fit into what IRMA would expect. We work according to Anglo American responsible way. And there's also Anglo American sustainability standards and expectations. We have technical standards and a series of principles that map all IRMA's expectations. So yes, we were working to meet IRMA standards, but that is also part of what we work, the way we work usually because of the legislation, regulations, the what matters to all the stakeholders around us. So it is not specifically that we wanted to meet IRMA's expectations. We really wanted to show that the way we worked before that already met most of what IRMA expected. But to us, it was important that it was not us talking about ourselves, but rather an independent third party reinforcing that we were meeting standards. But of course, we are always working harder to do better, to meet higher standards. But it's not that we decided to work so that we could meet IRMA standards and we had to revolutionize the way we worked. No, perhaps it brought a different perspective, but mostly to what we already did.
There's an incredibly important question that is about IRMA 75 and recognizing that 75% alone doesn't mean something as a number. And Ivan, I think you were speaking to this same thing. It's not the score. And in fact, 75% still indicates that 1/4 of what is the global definition of best practice, there's more work still to do that could be done to improve. Associated with this question is this concern around the risk. What if that 25% is in the biggest impact? And that was part of the reason we created the critical requirements to ensure that you weren't leaving something behind. And Michelle, I wonder if I can put you on the spot to speak to the role of the critical requirements for exactly this reason. How do the achievement levels try to make sure that you're not leaving behind the biggest areas of impact?
Thanks, Amy. As has been described previously in our presentation, we have 40 critical requirements that, in addition to scoring sites against all of the requirements, there are 40 that have been selected as representing things which, if you are performing against those criticals, then we haven't left major risks unattended. An example might be, human rights abuses, for instance. So the critical requirements are intended to capture some of the greatest risks associated with mining. They're not necessarily basic initial requirements, but they are requirements that were selected by our board as those that matter the most in terms of ensuring that there aren't significant gaps or risks associated with the mine that could go unnoticed in the course of assessing 400 requirements.
I'm going to cue Mr. Samoes and Michelle each with a question, so you have time. So, Michelle, I'm going to put you on deck. I'll let Mr. Samoyas go. So you're ready. IRMA has several audits already, and are you seeing common gaps and hardest to achieve requirements amongst those? And then when you take that one, can you please also take the issue of certification versus auditing? Is IRMA using the word certification? So if you can take both of those. Mr. Samoyas, I'm going to come to you first then and have you answer the question, how influential have your customers been in you engaging in IRMA? This person's curious, what has given Anglo your own internal commitment and motivation to do this? Were your customers influential in you making the decision to engage in the IRMA system?
Of course, we always want to deliver to our clients the highest quality possible in our product, which does not mean the highest level of purity of our ore, but rather everything that is included in its production. It's a lot more, and that is part of the internal demands and expectations of the company itself, what the company expects from itself, and that is also observed when we see that the stakeholders express their needs and expectations, and we work hard to do always more and better to meet their expectations. So it doesn't come from one need or one client specifically. There's a lot that comes from us wanting to always do more and better and more responsibly so that we can deliver a product, but also so that we can help communities flourish, we can help the economic development in a sustainable way to the region that so kindly hosts our operations.
Okay, to you, Michelle.
Great. I'm going to take the question about certification first. When IRMA was first written, we anticipated that we would speak about achievement against IRMA in terms of certification. And certification is often used out in the world to provide a guarantee about performance against something. And oftentimes certification implies a minimum set of standards. Something is certified to meet the minimum standards for organic when it comes to food, or quality when it comes to other things. And IRMA is very committed to a cycle of continuous improvement. And therefore, we are removing references in IRMA to certification and instead are moving towards verification, because what our audits do and what our sites who are participating in the program do is measure performance against the standard and report a score, which, as you can see, is, for instance, anywhere from 0 to 100% for each chapter. And Amy, as I was speaking, I have now forgotten what the other question was.
I'm looking back at it as well. The answered set now. The most common gaps, Michelle, and then we're at the end of time. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. I will quickly hit this and say that there are not actually big themes that have come out in the audits that have been performed. And I'm actually pleased to see that across sector, different ores where there's some commonality, across companies where there's commonality, across regions where there's commonality, we see a lot of diversity in the sites, which, as the assurance director, tells me that our auditors are really digging in and getting unique findings that the level of detail that you find in the IRMA standard is actually revealing very site-specific performance for each of the sites that are being audited.
So we are at time. I will say that the IRMA standard itself is also in the midst of being improved. It's open for public review and comment. And while the comment period has now officially closed, we've granted many extensions. We always welcome your feedback, because making sure we're measuring against the right metrics is essential to having the confidence in the results that come from that. So please feel free to be in touch and share with us how we can improve the IRMA standard. To those who ask the questions specifically about what is Anglo American doing to engage their community, please open this report and look at it. And as Adan said, if you feel that the information there is incomplete, you'd like to know more, or you think things are missing, please be in touch with IRMA, with Anglo American, and with our audit firms to learn more. And we thank you so much for joining us to learn more today. And thank you so much to Anglo American for being willing to step into this space and learn along the way with us and be willing to be measured against the most rigorous standard in the world today.